Alright, hello! So, it seemed like you guys really enjoyed the discussion on the Inaros augments, so now we're going to talk about some assorted augments that got voted on a little bit before the Inaros augments. And in fact, two of these are actually about to be implemented into the game, either on the 17th or on the 31st. So, please be excited for that. Because I think the ones that are going to be implemented are probably more on the fun rather than good side, but they should be enjoyable. So, first, we have Rhino Stop. Now, Rhino Stop is a hard to augment ability, I think, because you run a risk immediately with such a wide-reaching ability that you can make it really, really OP if you're not careful about it. But the one we ended up having win actually potentially opens up a new type of Rhino, I think. And that is that Iron Skin would be replenished an amount based on number of enemies hit by Rhino Stop. So, there's really high potential, and then there's a really, low where this could sit. Because the way that this is worded is really vague. Now, if it replenishes based on a percentage, I think that this could potentially make it into some Ironclad builds, because if you were going to get a really, really good Iron Skin going, of let's say you're gonna get an Iron Skin going of I don't know, 300k, which is not ridiculous. You'd have to get you'd have to set it up, but you could definitely achieve it if you can then have your Rhino Stop give you back modified by power strength, let's say 28% if you hit 7 enemies with it. That's really strong. That's a really strong heal for Iron Skin, and there's no way to heal Iron Skin as of now, so that opens up some possibilities. So the augment that won, I think, is really interesting. That's personally the one that I would choose. Although I wouldn't be unhappy with a lot of these. The armor debuff one is definitely too weak, I think, but of course is metered that way because you run the risk of having it be way too strong, because Rhino Stomp covers a very, very large area. Slowing enemies, I don't think is effective. That wouldn't really do anything. I'm glad that that is actually at the bottom of this poll, because that one really doesn't do anything, in my opinion, anyway. But yeah, I think the shockwave that knocks down enemies might be the one that I would see maybe also being useful if the shockwave moved very slowly. But regardless, I think the one that won is the best one of the bunch there. If that is percentage based, I think that opens up for a possible new Rhino that can replenish his Iron Skin. And if there's overhealing on Rhino's Iron Skin with that augment becomes very, very interesting, because you could build a Stomp Rhino that keeps enhancing his Iron Skin and doesn't need as high of a base for his Iron Skin, which would be very, very cool, and I would love to see that. Do I think we're going to get that? Probably not, but opening up new builds for a character just because the augment is really unique is really awesome. Moving on, we've got Nova's Molecular Prime, and honestly, there's not any really good ones here. I think the best one won, once again, by quite a large margin, just like the Rhino one, but it's just... So the Nova's 4, also, in the same way as Rhino's 4, is very, very strong. It's a really good ability, and you do run the risk of making it way too strong, because Nova's Molecular Prime was already too strong in the past and had to be nerfed down to what it is now. So you don't want to accidentally, by one augment, bring it back to that absurd power level that it was at. That being said, I think the one that won is also kind of boring, even if it is the best, which is primed enemies are drawn to each other within X radius, exploding for X damage upon collision. So the damage from Nova's 4 isn't really what's good about that. The good thing about what this could do is just pack enemies together and maybe give you some weak localized vortexes, because that would make it... Basically, it's going to make the ability a harder crowd control. It's going to slow them, but it's also going to make it so they can't really move away from where they are anyway. I think the use case for this really is going to be on Spiva, because on Spiva you can afford to have some more like higher range, which is, I suppose, the X radius there would be affected by range. And then you could make it so that these enemies that are really fast are potentially like able to get to you really quickly, but always be close together. And that could be really, really good for Spiva. And that's kind of the potential there. All the other ones here are not really great, and some of them are actually, I think, would be a huge downside and would be really fucking annoying, which is the primed enemies cause bullets with an X radius to steer into them, increasing allied accuracy. That doesn't really increase allied accuracy depending on the range of that, because then you can't shoot the guy behind the guy in front. And that always is shitty, 100% of the time. So I'm very, very glad that one didn't win. Moving on, though, we've got Limbos. And this one is really interesting because the Limbo's about to be reworked, and this vote happened before we heard about that. So I don't know what this is going to mean for that ability. That being said, the one that won here is kind of completely useless. While in the Rift, killing banished foes has a % chance of spawning an echo of themselves that attack other banished enemies. So that's an augment for something that Inaros does with some of his abilities. That is just like a useless cool thing that he does. You don't want to take a mod slot for a useless cool thing. Like, you can in like gimmicky builds, but the reason I say that is because Limbo clearly needs help. Clearly, he's getting a rework. He needs help because he's not in a great place. Like, he's playable, but not in any good kind of way. So, what happens with this due to the rework will be really interesting, because if they have to adhere to this, or if they want to adhere to that augment still being a thing, I think Limbo might not end up in a good place. I would very much like to see that just get completely scrapped, and then we just revote on something. But yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. I think the runner-up to this ability is actually kind of cool, though. Which is just creating a portal for allies to enter the rift. That's potentially useful, especially if it is an in and out rift. That would be very cool. Moving on, though, we've got a big winner, which is Nyx, and this is one of the ones that's about to be implemented into the game. This won by an absolute landslide, and it's not surprising that it did. It forms a smaller bubble that moves with Nyx, allowing her to use it for defense. So what we don't know yet is if whether or not Nyx is able to shoot and do other things in this form, or whether we're going to be experiencing Tranquility. And with that I mean Zenyatta's ultimate from Overwatch, for those of you that don't know. Basically it means that he can't use guns or anything, and he's just got this AoE that's moving with him. So it's potentially useful for getting Nyx through certain areas. Like, sometimes you just like need to like move past a group of enemies to get to like a more advantageous position, and Nyx is really squishy, so sometimes she has like a hard time with that. So being able to use this to get around the battlefield would be really, really helpful. The other really interesting thing about this is that whenever you use Nyx's 4 in mid-air, you just float there. So if it locks your height whenever you activate it, it could be a really interesting way to get around as Nyx. Because you could potentially be very, very fast and like kind of just fly around with Nyx. Even if you're locked to one single height, you could go very, very fast by doing that, I think. I think that is going to be really interesting. It is not surprising at all that it just won by a huge landslide, because I think that combines fun and useful, which is awesome. And it'll be nice to see that very, very soon. Next up, we have Mesa. So this one, I'm on the fence about this augment. I'm very much on the fence about this, because allows her to move at walking pace. It is a good augment, barring one thing that's not specified in that she needs to be able to move and shoot. Like, if she can't do both, then that augment is not worth using. If she can do both, I think that's a choice for a lot of players. I probably won't use it, like, no matter what, because I tend to go in and out of Peacemaker a lot. But just in general, I think that is like, that's like the edge of being usable or kind of totally useless. Because if you have to like move and then stop and then shoot, and you can't just keep shooting, it's worthless. If you can move and shoot, That'll probably be good for quite a few situations, actually. Especially if you... Because at walking pace, let's say you have like a Volt in the party, that's actually not that slow, and you could kind of sustain yourself with energy orbs given the right team setup. But yeah, there's potential for that augment. I can see where they're going with it. It would be nice if that also included rolling. Like if you could also roll along with walking and maybe not, like obviously not shoot while rolling, but that would give you a little more movement. And we already have Mesa's ability to roll from the Conclave augments, so I think there's some potential there. I definitely am glad that that second one did not win. Like, the attack ring grows larger instead of shrinking. That is just getting us back to, like, the old nerfed Mesa where she was 360 farming. That's just a huge, like, area direction where you kill everyone. And if that had won, I'm pretty sure that Mesa would have been nerfed in some way again to balance out that mod even existing, which would be no good. Very happy that that lost. Just because of that. Speaking of things that got nerfed, Trinity's Blessing. So this one is interesting. I think it's really good, but at the same time, I don't know if it will be used. So what one is that it grants a damage buff, parkour boost, and partial knockdown resistance. And that's really strong. That's 3 great effects that fucking work great together. And I'm excited for them. I just don't know if this is going to make it into the general Blessing build that we see, because the places where we see Blessing are LOR. Like, generally, I would probably say that 90% probably of Blessing Trinity is played in LOR, if I had to take a guess. And in LOR, you don't want the damage buff. That's useless. A parkour boost is nice, but not really needed. You're not moving a whole lot in LOR. Now, the thing that's really interesting there, though, is the knockdown resistance. Because if you give your team members that need to stay on their goddamn buttons, like, the impossibility of being, like, knocked away or knocked down, then that's actually very, very useful there. But it depends on what that knockdown resistance is. So I think there's a lot of potential for this, and I think it's a good augment, but I think it's a good augment that might not see use in the use case that we see for Blessing Trinity right now. Otherwise, depending on the quality of the parkour and the damage buff, I think for like a solo tanky Trin that is kind of there for herself and not really super worried about blessing the team, just in general play, which is kind of the way I like to play Trinity whenever I'm just like, I want to play Trinity because she looks nice. And just going into random missions, I play Blessing whenever I do that. I don't play EV. I think I would probably use this augment. I just don't know how much use it's going to actually ascertain, even if it is very good. Good overall. Definitely fantastic overall. And finally, Valkyr. This is one of the other ones that is getting implemented very, very soon. So this one turned around. Like, quite near the end, this one totally, like, flipped it around. And I was really worried about this vote, because obviously, at the time, Valkyr was my absolute favorite Warframe. Now it's Mesa. 1 and 2 might change back, who can say. But what ended up winning, and I'm very happy about this, is that alt fire to teleport to targeted enemies. That's way better than our alternative, because what was winning up until maybe the last couple days of this vote was summon Kavats that attack with Valkyr during Hysteria, which is absolutely fucking worthless. Completely worthless. Nothing can save that shit. Otherwise, there are some good ones here, but none that are really necessary. Like the first one, the one that's on 2.7%, that's garbage. It deserves to be there. The very bottom one, melee counters, useless, not needed. Allies don't need their melee count. Like, by and large, your allies don't want the melee counters. I think that introduces a type of party that could go really, really far in Endless, where you have, like, let's say 2 Valkyrs, Wukong, maybe. It's like a weird grouping. It might just be 4 Valkyrs. Like, if you did 4 Valkyrs that were all just charging each other's melee counters up, that influx of hits, like, between them all could give you a really, really high damage bonus. That might be interesting, but it's not really that cool. Increases the range of claws. Primed Reach already exists, and like that, like that will give you enough range. I don't like it's way too much of like a simple straight buff, and it's not really very interesting at all. It would just be a mod that you would use, which is really boring. Upon killing a foe, she draws aggro of the other enemies in range. That's more interesting because it keeps enemies away from your team, and we don't have a way to modify threat right now without doing some like real like build looking at where it's like a bunch of your team is using silent weapons, one of them is using loud. That's the person you want to be taking damage and doing all this kind of other stuff to try and influence threat. That would be a way to directly influence threat, which would be very interesting. But alt fire to teleport to targeted enemy is, I think, so I'm two minds about this. One is that it's not really a great thing for her. But two is that that's fun as hell. Like, that is really, really fun. Like, just being, like, an invincible, like crazy psycho murderer that can teleport. Like, that's fucked up. Like, that's some terrifying shit right there. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to use. And Hysteria is already a really good ability, so just giving it an augment that is just, like, a fun new thing for you to do, as long as it works well, is totally fine, and I'm not unhappy with it. I would definitely be unhappy with the Kavats, though, because that shit is... It's like... I have a request for those of you that are watching this that are maybe in the design council. Please don't vote for things that summon AI. The AI in Warframe is not friendly. Like, it being on your side is usually a disadvantage, even, unless it just has an AoE effect that is, like, giving you a good benefit. Like, unless you're Necro summoning ancient healers and shit, like, summoning random AI is not good. It's never been effective, and I don't think it ever will be, just because of the way that AI is structured in games, and the necessities of not being too smart, but needing to be kind of dumb, and it's hard. It's very, very difficult to do right, and it's not a mark against DE that their AI doesn't respond well when it's on our side. It's fucking difficult to do, and it's hard to nail. But, like, we should probably avoid as much summon AI on our side as we can. My opinion, of course. But, still. But, aside with that, I'm going to show the augments that we're going to have very soon. These were posted on the Reddit by Rebecca. Lotus. DE Rebecca. This is what we're going to be getting on either the 17th or the 31st. Nyx's Absorb, which we just talked about. Neja's Warding Halo that can be cast on targeted allies, which I'm minorly worried about, but is a good augment in theory. Atlas's Landslide. This is really cool, don't know if it'll be used. And Inaros' Sandstorm, again, kind of cool, depending on the actual percentage chance on that stuff. Could see some use in a niche way. Valkyrie's Hysteria, as we just talked about, the Altfire Teleport. Fucking awesome, very excited. And then Ember's Accelerant increases the casting speed for all members in range by percentage. Which, unless that percentage is like 300%, I don't know what that's gonna do. But that's what we're gonna get. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.